Lesson 1.1, Parent Functions and Transformations. Our essential question today is how do you identify function families and describe transformations of parent functions? We've already analyzed what the parent function looks like. Now we're going to come down to the quadratic transformations and see what it means when we do certain operations in the quadratic function. So for our first problem, on the inside of the parentheses, I see that I have a plus 2. So similarly to the absolute value problem, I'm going to write my description. I see that I had an inside add 2. When we did our observations the last few days, we saw that the inside add 2 told me to go to the left 2. Next problem, it's an inside, just like the first one, but it's no longer a plus 2. I see on the inside, I see a minus 2. So I want to write that description. And from our observations the last few days, we know that if it's on the inside and we subtracted 2, an inside subtract 2 told me that my function moved to the right 2. So if we are on the insides and if we are adding or subtracting, that means that we are going to be moving either to the left or to the right. Adding on the inside told me to move to the left. Subtracting on the inside told me to move to the right. So now what happens when it's on the outside? So I see that I have a plus 2 on the outside, and I also have a minus 2 on the outside. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to describe that. Oh, that's not an inside. That is an outside. So from our observations, if it was on the outside and I added 2, this told me to go up 2. If I was on the outside and I minus 2, this told me to go down 2. So my observations were that if I was on the inside and adding, I moved to the left. If I was on the inside and subtracting, I moved to the right. If I was on the outside and adding, I moved up. If I was on the outside and subtracting, I moved down. So adding, subtracting, it's inside, it's left and right. If it's outside, it's up and down. Now, what if I'm not adding and subtracting? What if I am multiplying? So we have these 3 problems that involve multiplication. This involves multiplying by a negative 1. This is multiplying by a positive 2. And this is multiplying by a 1/2. So let's go ahead and go through and explain these. So our observations were that if we're on the outside and if we are multiplying by a negative 1, we noticed it was no longer facing up, that it reversed the other direction and faced down instead. So that meant that it reflected, it flipped. It reflected across the x-axis. And in parentheses, I'm just going to write it flipped down. So it meant it flips the other direction. Instead of flipping up, it now flips down. That's what multiplying by a negative 1 does. It reflects you across the x-axis. Well, what if it's positive and it's a big number? If I multiply everything by 2, that means I'm getting there twice as fast. Which means that I will be doing a vertical stretch by 2. If I'm multiplying everything by half, that means I'm going to get there at half the rate. Which means I have a vertical shrink by a 1/2. Now let's go ahead and look at the movements because this is what's going to help us see these. So we used to have an over 1 up 1, over 1 up 3, over 1 up 5, because this is a quadratic. It has an x squared attached to it. Well, this is no longer our movement because now we are vertically stretched. So we need to now multiply all of our verticals by 2. So I'm still over 1 every single time, but my ups are going to get multiplied by 2. So this 1 times 2 meant I'm now going up 2. This 3 times 2 means I'm now going up 6. This 5 times 2 means I am now going up 10. So I'm over 1 up 2, over 1 up 6, over 1 up 10. Everybody vertically stretched up by a multiple of 2. Well, now let's go ahead and look at what happened when it was 1/2. over 1 up 1, over 1 up 3, over 1 up 5 is what it used to be if it was just the plain old parent. It's no longer the plain old parent. It now has a multiply by a half. So that meant that we need to multiply all of our verticals by a half. I'm still over 1, but this 1 times a half is a half. I'm still over 1, but the 3 times a half is a 1.5. It's 3 halves. I'm still over 1, but 5 times a half is now 5 halves, which is 2.5. Everybody else is going up at half the rate. It's a vertical shrink. Everybody shrunk by vertically. So let's go ahead and look at the movement real quick for this one. It's still a vertical change. He used to be over 1 up 1, over 1 up 3, over 1 up 5. He's no longer up. Remember, he reflected across the x-axis, which means he's actually supposed to go down now. So it's over 1, down 1, over 1, down 3, over 1, down 5. He reflected. He's now going down.